Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 6 of Ask Anything, presented by Mosher Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Mosher's Director of Personnel. We are starting Season 6 off with a great episode that brings awareness on the Mayan people of Guatemala. And with me today to talk about this subject and bring light to her work in Guatemala is Jennifer Demar, who runs Guatemala Service Projects, an organization that works with local community leaders in Guatemala, listening to their concerns and needs and then springing into action, developing a plan, fund, and delivering the project to meet those needs. They have done magnificent work in Guatemala and are continuing to do so right now. Jennifer, as a matter of fact, just returned from Guatemala. Jennifer, it's great to have you with us on Ask Anything to talk about your work in Guatemala. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you.
We're very happy and excited to have you with us today. I think that this is something that needs to be talked about, obviously. But first off, let me start by asking, how did you find yourself in Guatemala?
Well, in the early 2000s, my husband and I decided to build our family through adoption. Of our 3 kids, 2 of them were born in Guatemala. And so my original exposure to life in Guatemala was through the adoption journey.
A lot of families in the United States obviously go to this route of adopting children overseas, and Guatemala is, I know, one of the countries that a lot of Americans go to. What prompted you to start Guatemala Service Projects?
Well, when the children that I adopted from Guatemala were teenagers, my husband and I thought it was the right time to take them to Guatemala and show them the needs that existed there and what factors may have influenced their birth family's decision to place them for adoption and provide more opportunities for them. So in 2015, my family took a trip to Guatemala with other families to experience what life was like in Guatemala.
And what did you find? Obviously, you've had the experience of adopting in Guatemala, but what did you find during that trip?
Well, when we had traveled as part of the adoption process, we stayed very close to the city because that's just what families did. You know, they were there for the transaction of completing the adoption and the legal requirements and weren't really there at that time as tourists. Guatemala City is an area that is more advanced, more developed, and more like life in any major city in the United States. But we knew that wasn't the reality for our children. So when we returned to Guatemala in 2015, we visited some more rural areas and had the opportunity to see what life was really like for the people that did not live in the city. The needs there are very significant. In fact, Guatemala is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere behind Haiti. Mm-hmm. So there are definitely factors that influenced the need for so many children to be placed for adoption, just because the families didn't have the means or the resources to provide for them, and they were looking for ways to give their children better opportunities. That was back in 2000 and 2001 and 2002, but the need still exists today. And that is part of the reason that we see so many families struggling to come to the United States and search for a better opportunity. I can definitely relate to that need. It existed then and it exists still. And so during my family's travel to Guatemala in 2015, it was really eye-opening because it was something that we had not been exposed to in the past, either at home or anywhere else for that matter. But it was also very touching because what we were experiencing at that time were the types of things that we knew the birth families of our children had also experienced. And because of that trip in 2015, we were led to make changes in our lifestyle and no longer took certain things for granted. And then, you know, made some goals to consider how we could give back. And maybe by helping Guatemala in little ways, it might mean that some other families wouldn't have to make the decision to separate and to consider adoption. You know, although My family is very blessed in being a family formed by adoption. We can't deny the reality that, children are best served if they can stay with their original families. And so our experiences led to ways that we could try to make a difference for the families that were still together and for the country that gave us our greatest blessings.
I can certainly relate to the experiences about living somewhere or being somewhere where you see things that you don't see them in your own backyard, to use that term. I used to live in Colombia for 4 years, and I lived through, and my family lived through some experiences, and we saw some things that, even though Colombia, it's a developed country, they, as you mentioned, Bogota, which is its capital city, it's very much like living in New York City or any big city here in the States. But once you start moving away from that center and you start going into those countryside towns, those less fortunate towns, you start seeing the things that I can only imagine you've been seeing in Guatemala since you started going there. So I can certainly relate to that. My oldest son at the time was 9, 10, 11 when we lived there. So now he's 19, and he pretty much saw the different world that people live in a place where they don't have access to clean water, or, things that, like you mentioned, things that we take for granted. And now that he's the age that he's at, he understands all the things that we get here and how we treat others, etc., because they look different or because they might be from a different background, etc. How important it is to look at everybody as equals and just treat them the best way possible, because he saw kids his age back when he was 9, 10, 11 on the streets. And it's just hard. It's hard, and it breaks your heart as an adult when you're watching it. But then when you're watching it through the eyes of your own child, it gives, like you mentioned, it makes you make different lifestyle changes, because now you're just not viewing it as an adult. Now you're seeing it from your child's perspective. So I can certainly relate to that.
Yes.
So now, speaking a little bit more into the services that Guatemala Service Projects does, what kind of services do you provide to address the needs of the people of Guatemala?
We've grouped the needs that we've realized and that have been shared with us into 5 main categories. One is malnutrition. Another is a contaminated water supply. A third is unaffordable health care. A fourth is just a basic lack of basic needs or a low quality of life. And a fifth is an undereducated population. So while our focus in a short and sweet way is that our mission is to provide opportunities to improve health and education in Guatemala, because those are the 2 super categories, so to speak. Some of those are related and some are not. So for an example, under malnutrition, our first area of identified need, there's a few things we do. And we try to think of multiple ways to focus on a certain need and not place all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak, because it's usually a multi-pronged approach that best addresses the need. But with regard to malnutrition, we have a vitamins program, which provides multivitamins to school-age children, elementary school-age children, and prenatal vitamins to mothers that are expecting. And what we've seen from our vitamins program is children that were previously diagnosed as severely malnourished is still, it's a gradual process, but now when we evaluate that same set of children, we see them on the growth charts for the first time ever. And they're no longer listless. They have life and rosy cheeks and are active and play and study. So our vitamins program is just a huge benefit toward combating malnutrition. And with regard to prenatal vitamins, without access to a lot of disposable income, it's often hard for families to feed their children or make the decision whether to feed them or educate them or to seek medical care or to feed them. And it's sad when you have to choose between all those things that are very important.
Yes.
But one thing that we've realized from the prenatal vitamins distribution is that women are now lactating. So imagine having the need to feed your child newborn and not producing any milk. Well, if you suffer from malnutrition, that is one of the things that your body is robbed of. And through the implementation of our prenatal vitamins program, now when women get pregnant and have a baby, their bodies are prepared to feed their children. So just an incredible benefit that program is. But two other programs briefly under the malnutrition category. One is a rice program. We have a partnership with an organization in the United States that has allowed us to be part of their rice distribution program, where 4 times a year we receive container loads of rice, and then we get a portion of that container load to distribute this fortified rice in the communities. And lastly, we have a program called $10 a cluck. And that was actually my husband's idea to come up with that name. And what it means is that it costs approximately $10 to buy an egg-laying hen. And when you donate chickens to a family, then they have 2 benefits that they receive right away. One is the protein in their diet from the eggs. But if they choose, they can also use some of the chickens that they receive to raise chicks and either grow their chicken family or sell chicks or excess eggs at market. So it's both a nutritional and an economic gift for the family that receives chickens.
All those programs sound amazing, and the work that you must be doing and must be so fulfilling for you and those that work with you.
It is, and thank you very much. It's really an honor and a blessing to be able to be in a position to help others. Sometimes it's a strain on time or resources or efforts, or sometimes just the struggles that come from working in an environment where people are from a different culture or speak a different language. There are certainly struggles, but the benefits and the joy and the feeling in your heart you get from helping others is worth all of those struggles by far.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure many people don't realize if you're in an area that doesn't have, drinkable, potable water, good, clean, drinkable water, or easy or simple access to food, how much of your day actually winds up being taken up by the search and the effort required to get water, to then make it drinkable, or to find food. And without those two things, the rest of your day is not really going to take shape. You're not going to have the energy or the time for education. You're going to get sick a lot more because you're not getting, proper calorie intake or the vitamins that you need, which are going to lead to greater and more frequent instances of disease. And being able to just walk over to a tap, turn it on, and I can drink that is something so many people, me included, on a day in and day out, just it's taken for granted. And if that disappeared, how many more hours of every single day of my life would be devoted to just that one thing? Because it is absolutely necessary.
You bring up a great point. Many people have asked why we don't focus on just education or just food relief or just healthcare. And the reality is that it's, like I said, it's multi-pronged, that you have to address all of the needs. Some organizations focus and they do very, very well. But we felt when we started our mission that you couldn't just address one, because then who would help with the other?
Yes.
As an example, our very first project was a library and a computer lab for an elementary school. And that kind of fell into our laps because of a relationship that we had curated over time. But as soon as we were done with that project and we began, well, now that that's out of the way, how do we really create a base and move forward? And we decided to start with a scholarship program. And that was to provide economic support to families so that their children could be educated. We figured that with education, people would develop into business or career professionals, and then the impact would be extended. You know, if we help one person and that person becomes a leader in their community, your ripple effect would end up blessing others as well. So that's where we started. But, you know, you can't send a child to school if they're sick. And they're sick if they don't have food and water that is clean and healthy. So then we quickly realized that we needed to really spread our efforts and divide and multiply. And then unfortunately the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit and so many families became ill or unemployed because society shut down, then food relief really came into high gear. You know, life has a way of interjecting and throwing up curveballs when we least expect them. And I think the best method is to constantly address needs as they arise. But clean water is a huge one. For communities that we support that have access to potable water, then we provide funds for trenching pipes and making the distribution from that clean water source to individual family homes. But some communities just don't have access to clean water. And in that case, we donate water filters. They still have to go out and retrieve water and bring it back to their homes, but then at least they have a filter to run it through to remove all the contaminants.
And that's so much faster than boiling
And
out
boiling, yeah.
impurities and things, and safer too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, but going back to what Brian was saying, and everything is connected. It's like a domino effect. If you don't have potable water, then food, how are you going to cook your food? How are you going to clean? How are you going to, going back to the vitamins, that mom that probably wants to nurse her baby, how is she going to drink? Because the milk has to come from somewhere. And like you mentioned, the vitamins do so much for them, but they also need liquid. They need potable water to drink so that they can create that. So it's all connected. I heard you talk about the focus, instead of just being one thing, being basically a group of things. And I commend you for that, because like Brian was saying, when you're dealing with so many things at once, I can't only imagine how stressful that is for you and your team in just trying to get all these, to use this term, ducks in a row, in making sure that you have all these different things so that the end result is to provide for those needs.
That's right. And another one of the struggles is kind of a blessing and a curse, so to speak. Thank God and thank to donors and project management that allows us to function well, and the trust that we've built up. We've done in our 7 years of existence some really incredible things. It surprises me, and I don't say that to brag, because the bragging is for all the others that help me in the organization. But when part of sharing our joy and our accomplishments is to give donors the confidence and the transparency of our organization. Through our social media pages, we have donors in the US and Canada that are following and applauding and sharing in our joy. But we also have communities in Guatemala that see what we're doing. And we've built such a fine reputation that people are coming, I use the phrase out of the woodwork, but what I really want to convey is that many people are anxious to receive support and projects, and that our list now is so unmanageably huge that we would need several organizations like us. I think the dream of every nonprofit is to do such a good job that the need no longer exists.
Yes.
Real quick, you mentioned social media. If someone was searching for your organization on social media, where should they look, and what specifically should they be searching for to find you?
I think a good search term is just the name of our organization, Guatemala Service Projects. We have a social media account on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. Our hope is to further expand our YouTube channel, but right now it's developing. And then our public website is guatsp.org, GUATSP.
Great, thank you.
So going back to what you were mentioning about communities and cities, do you have a specific community and city that you're serving at?
Thank you for that question. When we started our organization, we allowed some friends to direct us and provide us with opportunities to be in outreach in the communities that they were already familiar with. And in the beginning, we worked in 4 different areas of Guatemala. But last year, we decided to narrow our focus to only the municipality of Chichicastenango. Chichicastenango is a Quiche Mayan community that is located in the department of Quiche. It's a highland area where 97% of the population speaks the indigenous language, and it is at an elevation of about 7,000 feet.
Wow. When I lived in Bogota, we were at about 6,000 feet, and then you could go up this mountain called Guadalupe, and you could go up to basically 10,000 feet in a span of 5-10 minutes. If you walked it all the way up, which I did several times, it took about an hour or so for you to go from that elevation to that highest elevation. So I understand where you're coming from. So what do you appreciate the most about the cultural represented by the people there?
Well, I think the strength and fortitude of the Mayan people. You know, one of the areas that they have struggled with in maintaining their culture is that it is a cause or a reason for their oppression. Guatemala is roughly split between Spanish-influenced peoples and Maya people. And in their history, the Maya people were pushed back from their lands and then made to settle in areas that provided more challenges. And as a people, they have been told that to remove their culture and their appearance would help them acclimate into a society where there were more opportunities. Some have done that, but I really applaud those that maintain their culture and their source of pride because it is part of who they are. And I think since their civil war ended in the 1990s, 1996, that is still very fresh, and there's still a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done. But the thing I really admire the most about the culture of Guatemala is their community cohesion. Communities in Guatemala work so well together. They're unified, they support their neighbors, they work toward common goals, and they work very hard. They also have a very strong family focus and attention to faith. So if you take a people that are proud of their culture, that work hard as a community, that don't separate from their families, and in fact live in multi-generational households together, and they practice faith together, it means that they have hope for their future and the skills to actually implement opportunities that they're provided. And I think sometimes living in the United States, where your focus is individual accomplishment and personal career goals, and families are separated, children move out when they're 18 or 21, and the elderly, their final destination is maybe a nursing home in many cases. The thing I really appreciate most about helping in Guatemala is knowing that they have those community and family and faith supports to continue building together, and that they just don't give up.
I think that's a theme across most, if not all, Latin American cultures. And I mean, I'm originally from Puerto Rico, so that's how we grow up as well. Our families are very intertwined, even when we branch out and go away, which doesn't happen at 18, like it happens mostly here in the States. It happens like at 28, 29, 30. And I don't want to say that we're closer because of that, but like you mentioned, the community aspect of that, our neighbors, not just our families, but our neighbors, the people that we grow up next to. I mean, I still remember the people that lived next to my grandma's house and my mom's house when I was 6, 7 years old, because they had kids my age, they had grandparents just like me, and it was just together. everybody grew up together and the struggles were passed together. I still remember to this day, 1989, when Hurricane Hugo hit Puerto Rico back then. And my grandpa had this humongous avocado tree in his backyard, and that hurricane basically tore it in half. And a couple of days after the hurricane, our two next door neighbors were helping my grandpa picking it up, basically taking all the avocados that were still good so that we could eat them, over the next few days. We had no power, we had no water, but we had avocados. So I know
And
that
each
sounds,
other.
yeah, and I know that sounds silly, but it was just, again, community togetherness. Like, we all going through the same struggle. Let's pull ourselves out of there together. And I wish we would see that more in our own backyards nowadays. So I think what you say about the Mayan culture, it's true of many Hispanic cultures, but it is so good to hear that. I can only imagine the families, like with the elderly together with the great grandkids, et cetera, because that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
So if anyone was interested in helping out, what could they expect?
Well, it really depends on what ways a person wanted to help. A clear choice, or maybe the one that people think of first, is to travel with us and see the needs themselves. Each time that we go to Guatemala, we invite small groups to travel with us. Another might be to host a fundraiser or a supplies collection. For example, school supplies or vitamins or OTC, or over-the-counter medications, are things that we frequently take. Spanish books is another thing that we take. We've had school districts donate Chromebooks that were at an end of life cycle here in the United States, are given new life in Guatemala. And sometimes it's just a matter of following us on social media and sharing or liking a post that expands our reach and is really appreciated. Sometimes it's also including professional skills. I mentioned that one of our goals was to expand our YouTube channel and creating interviews of the people in daily life in Guatemala that we can share through videos on our YouTube channel. So if a person wanted to volunteer to do video editing or had skills in that area, then, we would take that. And what they would expect from that is just taking something that they're good at or that they enjoy and putting it to work to help others.
So you mentioned the trips. If somebody wanted to sign up for a trip, what could they expect? How long it would be? What could they expect about, obviously, their own living conditions, et cetera? What could they be doing?
Well, most of our trips are 9 days and incorporate a week flanked by 2 weekends. And we have about 30% tourism and cultural appreciation and 70% service learning. So whereas a travel agency might flop those around or focus only on tourism aspects, we set the expectation with travelers that if they're coming on a trip to Guatemala with us, the primary emphasis is going to be to learn about the nonprofit and how we address the needs there. We invite travel team members to learn how to install water filters or donate chickens or set up stove pieces to form a low emission stove that we donate. Sometimes it's just visiting schools and seeing what the typical school day is for kids that are in our scholarship program. And then we also share what we know of the Maya culture. We will observe cultural dances, fire ceremonies, visit museums or Mayan ruins. We'll do things to help a traveler or volunteer understand the whole picture for a person living in Guatemala and why certain things to a community in Guatemala are important that may not be important for us because of our culture and our circumstances or the resources that are available to us here in the United States.
Sounds like an amazing trip, to be quite frank. So before we go, I know you mentioned this before, but where can people go to find more information on the projects?
Our website is guatsp.org. And Guatemala Service Projects website has two main menus that would give a good overview of our projects. One of those menus is called New Projects, and those are for the projects that are in the dreaming and planning stages but haven't begun for lack of funds. And the other menu item is called Ongoing Projects. And ongoing is more so those that are in process but not fully complete, or the ones that are recurring and that there's always a need for, like water filters and vitamins and stoves and scholarships and things like that.
All right. Well, Jennifer, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you with us on Ask Anything. Thank you very much for bringing this topic up to the air and letting us share your great contributions to the people of Guatemala, to our listening audience. So Jennifer, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask Anything presented by Motion Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to Jennifer Demar talk with us about her work with the Guatemala Service Projects. Join us next time when we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts on what they're currently working on. Remember to send us your ideas or topics via our social media feeds. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.